Well, hey there, I'm Brian Goulet of GouletPens.com, and if I sound a little bit under the weather, it's because I am. I don't know if I'm actually sick or whether it's just the changing weather. This tends to happen in the fall. Several people have this kind of going on. My kids are kind of coughing a little bit and stuff like that, so I don't know. I'm going to sound a little froggy today, but I'm well enough to do a broadcast, so I'm still going to do it. So this is Goulet Q&A, episode number 96. It's hard to believe we're at 96. That's kind of crazy. We're creeping up on 100 here. It's getting crazy. But I got a good broadcast for you today. So let me catch you up real quick on just some things that have been going on last week or so. Fall is definitely here. At least that's what it feels like in the U.S. and Virginia especially. It's like 51 degrees in the morning and then like 78 degrees in the afternoon. It's crazy. Everybody's just thrown for a loop. So I never know what to wear. That's where I brought this fleece. I wore it for like 10 minutes this morning and then it was too hot. So go figure. Let's see here. We launched the Edison Nouveau Premier Midnight Thunder. This is the fall 2015 edition pen. The seasonal edition will be around for about 3 months and it's pretty cool. We've been wanting to use this material for over a year. We've just been waiting for the right time to do it. And it's never too late for now. So we decided to go ahead and go for that. I got a video out on that on Wednesday, so you can check it out. Rachel and I had fun doing that together. And I think, honestly, if you watch that video, like we got some good banter and stuff like that. We didn't even like do a lot of takes or anything like that. It was pretty much continuous. I think that Rachel and I periscoping more together has really helped us practice our banter. So we've done, at this point, like 74, 75 periscopes. So that's been really kind of fun. A lot of time that we spent on there and good folks, good times. I know I haven't been doing it much in the last week or so. I may be like running myself a little ragged. That might be why I'm falling a little bit under the weather here, but we just had a lot going on personally. Like we're in the church choir now. I was out of town for a couple of days at a conference and, you know, just stuff like that. So it's been working pretty hard. So burning the candle at all ends. I would say both ends, but it's more like a candle-like ball that's burning from all sides. So trying to have a little bit of life balance in place, but for anybody who knows, who has kids in school and their own business and stuff like that, it can be kind of tough. Life is hard, right? I know you feel really sorry for me. We also got the Field Notes Shenandoahs in. I don't have one here because somebody grabbed mine and I don't have it. So it's green Field Notes, you know, different colors that are actually kind of named after the Shenandoah, you know, like region, which is right here in Virginia. So that's kind of cool. You know, it was neat. They were showing, I showed their video. They were showing some footage and stuff. There's nothing like weird or crazy going on with these. It's just different color covers. So, you know, that's kind of neat. Nothing like too fanatical to go about there. We did get restocked on Jeroboam Emerald of Chavor, which as of the shooting of this video, we still have a good amount of it. So if you haven't gotten any yet, you know, you can see all the gold flecks kind of settling in the bottom there. Oh, you can actually see that really good in the video. I have a monitor right here. So, see if I shake it up a little bit. See, there you go. You can see the gold kind of going into the bottle. Anyway, so this is around now. It definitely sold out very quickly the first time we got it. This time around, you know, we got it, I think Friday last week. So it's actually had some staying power. So that's kind of cool. So that is a very neat ink. And then we are going to be getting restocked on some TWSBI Ecos, I think next week, maybe late next week. We don't have a tracking confirmation yet. I know TWSBI is supposed to be getting some in this week. It takes a little while to come from us because they're in California, we're in Virginia. But, you know, we're going to be having some soon, so look out for those. And then also we're going to have Visconti Homo Sapiens, which if you've been on Periscope, you've seen me playing with ours a little bit. These, they're, you know, two sizes, the steel and the bronze finish, in all the available nib sizes. We're going to have those, except broad. We're not going to stock broad right off the bat because broad nibs just in general, not really popular for us, like at all. I know it might seem kind of surprising, but really no one's kind of loving the broads. But for this pen especially, you really don't need it because these pens are extremely wet. So just yesterday, I shot a very thorough, long video that we'll be putting out next week. Jenny is in the process of editing it, poor soul, and she's she's cutting it all together. It is it's going to be probably one of the longest video reviews I've ever done. So, you know, short of like a Q&A. But it's going to be like the longest, probably the longest single pen review. I don't know, she hasn't completely cut it down, but I would guess it's going to be somewhere in the 25-minute range. So it'll be quite thorough, but I feel like it's an expensive pen. You should like get your money's worth in terms of how much video you're gonna watch. Not that you're paying for the video, but you know what I mean. Come on. And then we're gonna have Visconti pen cases as well. They're super nice. I don't have any to show you right now because Sarah's in the process of photographing them all. Sarah's over in that direction, that's why I'm pointing there. But she's gonna be photographing them all. They look awesome. They're super high quality, Italian leather, very supple, just really, really, really classy. So if you're carrying around, you know, Viscontis or like really nice pens, you may want to go with a nice kind of case to match it. So we'll have that as an option. And I'm planning on doing a video on that. We will see how that goes, see how sick I get, and how much that might put me out of commission. Who knows? It's kind of crazy these days. All right, let's get into the questions for this week, see if I can survive it. Got 10 questions. Ended up getting a lot. We got like 50 questions this week, so I had to really pare it down, so I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question. And also, I just want to say, Facebook changed something. Like they're not having nested comments right now, so it's super annoying. Facebook, if you're listening, Mark Z, if you're listening right now, please change it back. Give us nested comments again. It makes it impossible for us to respond to comments when we can't nest them, because then you can't see who we're responding to like right in there. It like puts it down at the bottom and all that. It's almost unusable. So I'm really sorry if you're on Facebook, you're leaving comments and we're not responding as much. Facebook changed something and it just makes it way harder to respond to comments now. So that's kind of annoying. So we'll deal with that. I don't like to complain, but I just did, so sorry. Anyway, pens and writing questions. Let's go. I got a couple of these. This is from Garrett O on Facebook. Garrett, you asked me, and this is a really good question. Modern flexible nibs are always compared poorly to vintage flex nibs. The vintage nibs are really the only way to get good consistent flex from what I can tell. Why is this? What changed? Did we forget how to make them? Since flex is such a highly sought after feature, why don't modern pen companies just make them the same way that they used to? It's a great question, and I could have sworn I've answered it before, but I don't know if maybe I have, or maybe I did and it was kind of like a I don't know kind of answer. So I'm going to try to answer it somewhat thoroughly, even though you're not going to like my answer. I'll just tell you that right now. So here's the thing. Okay, I've talked to some nib folks. You know, actually when I went to DC show in August, I talked to Leigh Reyes, who has a lot of different flex nibs, does a lot of cool calligraphy stuff. I talked to Richard Binder, some other like people who review pens and stuff like that. The first thing I want to say is, like, right off the bat, I don't have a lot of experience with vintage flex nibs, like these wet noodle kind of highly sought after nibs. I have a couple of, I have a Maybe Todd Swan, and I have a Waterman 52, but I don't think it's flex. And then I have, no, I might have two Waterman. No, yeah, I have a Waterman Pink as well. But they're not like the full flex nibs. They're just like semi-flex at best. So they're really no better than like a Pilot Falcon or a Noodler's pen or something. The pens that I specifically have. You pay a lot, they're hard to find sometimes, to get these like super flowing pens that you kind of hear about, these vintage flex pens. But the thing is, like, I've talked to enough people and seen enough, you know, videos, and Periscope has helped with that actually. Like Leigh Reyes Laypod has been doing some good stuff with a lot of her flex stuff, and you can get flex like it was back in the day. Today you can, it's just not mass produced. So in terms of what you're asking me here, I think it's definitely true that modern flex pens just are not the same as the old vintage ones. That's like, just, I'm going to go ahead and say that that's definitely kind of universally accepted as truth. Even like a Noodler's flex pen, as great as they are, they're not a wet noodle vintage flex. Wet noodle is what they refer to as like some of the flexiest, softest, springiest, you know, most line variation pens around. Other ones like the Pilot Falcon definitely gets line variation, but it's not as responsive as like a vintage flex. And it's the one that I think is kind of the most like kind of this wet noodle thing. It's really not on the same plane, but it's almost there, is the Omos 14 karat extra flexible. That is really soft. And I was, you know, kind of reading up on Richard Binder's site because I know he has a lot of experience with nibs, vintage nibs especially. And he specifically said on there that like the Pilot Falcon is really kind of a semi-flex. And then he said the Ogiva Extra Flexible is kind of the closest thing you can get from without customization to a true flex, which I feel is true because I've used that nib a bit. We sell OMOS, and I believe that is true. However, it's kind of a trade-off because when you have a really flexible nib, it's easy to spring the tines. It can be kind of finicky sometimes if you don't know what you're doing. And it's also, OMOS's pens they're not cheap, so you're going to pay a lot. And it's like, if that's the only reason you're getting it is to get that nib, it might make more sense for you to actually source out one of these old vintage pens and kind of deal with that. So it's not like, oh, such a surefire, easy decision, because to spend $400 or $500 on a pen just to get a flex nib. So now that I've said that, so I think if I could summarize kind of my whole feelings on this question, it would have to be that it's not economical, honestly. I think that back in the day, to make nibs like this that flex a lot requires very specialized knowledge, a lot of expertise in terms of craftsmanship. It's not something that I think you can easily just stamp out on a machine. So there's a lot of customization that kind of needs to go on with these nibs. Or if there is some kind of specialized machinery that's needed, none of it's around anymore because it's been 70, 80 years since these nibs have been kind of in their heyday. It was the early 1900s when these truly flexible nibs were a little more commonplace. And it's not even all the nibs were like that back then. Only some of them were. So it was already kind of a subset of fountain pen nibs back in the early 1900s when everybody was using fountain pens. So back then, Spencerian and copperplate and some of these fancier, scriptier writings were more commonplace. They were taught in schools and stuff like that. The Palmer method, once it came out, which is what is, well, now somewhat not being taught. I'm going to talk about that in a question in a minute. But that's what's been taught in schools for a while now, is the Palmer method, which is faster, easier to do than Spencerian. But Spencerian was more the standard before the Palmer method came out. So Spencerian is very beautiful, but it takes a while to practice. It takes a while to actually do the writing. And when the typewriters first came out, the typewriters were kind of like texting and computers now, where it's oh, computers are killing the pen. It was like that. It was oh, typewriters are going to kill handwriting. So this guy Palmer, came out with this Palmer method, which was a faster method of handwriting that could keep up more with the speed of a typewriter. So that's why handwriting didn't die completely back then. So it was kind of the same thing we're kind of seeing play out now, except this would have been 80 years ago. So maybe even older than that. But anyway, forgive me if I'm a little bit off on my dates here. I'm not super into this stuff, but I've researched it a bit and read up some. So I know enough to be dangerous maybe. But anyway, maybe I'll just inspire you enough to go research and correct all of my incorrect facts. So hopefully I'll do that. Anyway, so you had the flex nibs that were kind of a specialized nib even back at that time. To do it there were maybe, think about it, Waterman and Schaefer and stuff like that were in their heyday back then. And so they were making pens all over the place. So it was more economical because everybody was using fountain pens. I'm pulling this number completely out of thin air, but say 10% of those people wanted a flex nib. 10% of, I don't know, 150 million people or whatever. I'm also pulling that number out of midair. 10% of that is 15 million or so. Again, number completely made up. But if you have 15 million people that want to buy a flex nib, yeah, you're going to throw some effort behind that. And there's a lot of craftsmen around that time and a lot of handwork and stuff. It made a lot of economical sense to offer that. These days, there's nowhere near 15 million people that want flex nibs. Maybe 15,000. Seriously, no, it's probably more than that. Maybe 50,000 people that use fountain pens for one, and then use flex nibs, and then want a true flex. I know it seems on the internet that everybody wants a flex nib and that it's so obvious. Why don't pen companies just make these nibs because they would make a killing and it would just fulfill all this demand? The honest truth is that there's not that much demand in the grand scheme of things, because the equipment that's required to make, really anything. I mean, to make, a typical pen, right? Like, I'm trying to find a typical, I don't even have like a typical pen. I've got all these specialized pens around here, but to make just a typical pen, like, okay. This isn't even a pen I care. Oh, well, here we go. I'll go with like a Pilot G2, right? So this is a very typical, completely commoditized pen. To make something like this, to get the mold, just the dies that are used in the mold to make the shape of this pen might cost you $100,000 to $250,000. Just the die to make the mold for this. Not to mention all the equipment. You're talking probably $1 million investment, to get all the equipment and everything, and to get a piece of equipment that costs, these numbers are kind of out of thin air, but it's not probably too far off. $1 million to completely get set up to make one type of nib. Just think of how many pens and whatnot you would have to sell, not only to make that back, but then to make a profit off of it and stuff like that. I don't think that the demand is there. Now, it kills me to say that, and that's why I said at the beginning, you're not gonna like my answer. Because all of us who are like deeply entrenched in the fountain pen world are like, oh my gosh, if I could just get a wet noodle pen, it would be so awesome and it would be amazing. But I'm not joking when I say they'd probably have to charge $400 to $500 to make a pen that has a nib like that. That's just probably economically what they'd have to do to pay back the equipment and the investment, all that stuff, if they even had like the craftsmanship and the capability to make them anymore. So like technologically, yes, I think everything is there in place now to make them like they used to be back in the day. But I don't think the economics are there, or at least most companies don't see the economics there to be able to make it justifiable in their mind. Now, I can't speak for everybody, and maybe I'm wrong, and I kind of hope that I am. I kind of hope that we can generate enough interest in these things. I will say, like, since the Noodler's pen came out and a flex nib for $14 or $20 came out, a whole lot more people are aware of flex nibs now than they used to be. And so there is more interest, and I'm not saying it couldn't ever get there, but it is a niche within a niche within a niche. It is so super, like, focused in terms of the economy. I just don't know that it's really there. So I'll continue to speak to all my manufacturers and tell them, like, hey, these are something that everybody wants. But I just don't know that you're going to get, a pen like that. I got somebody calling me here. I might have to take that call in a minute. But I've just got. Sorry, that phone call really threw me off. But I've got to believe that it would be really hard for a pen company to do that these days. Now, that said, it doesn't mean you're out of luck. If you still want a really, really, really flexible nib, you can get it. But you have to get it customized by a nib meister, if you want to call them that, nib specialist, someone that does that. And you're gonna pay probably $100 just for the nib customization, not even counting the pen. So you're gonna have to buy a gold nib pen, probably a 14 karat gold nib pen, because that's like the right type of metal for this kind of customization. You're gonna have to buy that, and then you're gonna have to pay for the customization. So you're gonna pay hundreds of dollars anyway. I don't know that there's a way around that to get that true vintage flex experience, because I think it's just so specialized. It's just not economical anymore these days. So I hope I'm wrong, I really do, but that's my feelings on the matter. All right, second question I have here. This is from Trent V on Facebook. And this is another good one that's gonna spark some interest. Okay, Trent says, I'm currently a junior in high school in the DC suburbs. The new curriculum for all students does not require students to learn cursive anymore. However, I was taught in a different state. My cursive is very good, I think, and other cursive people think so as well. I like that, cursive people, it's a good term. However, my teachers and my friends cannot read cursive, so I usually have to write in print, or my teachers get mad at me. What should I do? Oh my gosh, Trevor, this breaks my heart, man. Breaks my heart. There was something that came up on like the Fountain Pen Network Facebook page, I think. That was somebody who, it was a student that was writing their name in cursive, and the teacher put a big red X and said, "Don't do this, write in print," and it just lit everybody up. So I don't know, maybe I'm hoping we can get into a little bit of a discussion here in the comments. But this is tough, man, this is tough. Because the Department of Education does not require states to teach cursive in schools anymore, which is kind of a bummer. And there's all kinds of studies and all kinds of stuff that say that writing in cursive, handwriting actually helps to stimulate, brain activity in the right way. Personally, I'm a musician, so I've played a lot of instruments in my life. I believe that writing with a pen is just like playing an instrument. It requires you to have hand-eye coordination. It fires up different synapses in your brain. It requires you to think differently because you got to slow down a little bit so your thoughts are more intentional and you process information differently than you would if you're typing or if you're not writing something. So there's a lot of reasons why I like cursive. And now that my son is in kindergarten, he's like plugged into the system, you know what I mean? And it's just like, oh my gosh, like, is he going to be dealing with that kind of stuff too? It just breaks my heart to think that not only is it not being taught in schools, but eventually once it's not taught enough, there's going to be a pushback against people that do write in cursive from the people that can't read it. So, oh man, this is really tough. And I don't know that I have a great answer for you other than if people can't read what you're writing, you can't write it. It's like writing in a different language. If they can't read it, it's not an effective form of communication. So when you're writing in those specific circumstances, I don't really know what to do unless you really want to try to like rise up and fight the system and fight the man, if you will, which I'm totally on board for. But, in terms of like, it's not going to help you get better grades. I'm sure of that. So, you got to pick your battles. But that's tough. That's really tough. I would say that if people are really getting mad at you and like having an issue, maybe like have your parents talk to that teacher and be like, look, deal with it. Or, it's tough because I empathize with our teachers because they have really hard jobs and it's tough. But at the same time, it's like, is cursive gonna die? Like, is it really gonna die? And that's a tough thing for me to really think about because obviously being in the fountain pen world, I write in cursive with fountain pens. It's weird. I am really weird like this. Maybe some of you are the same way. I've talked about this before, but I'll bring it up again. When I write with a ballpoint, which is rare, but sometimes I have to, or a rollerball pen, the G2 that I pulled out a second ago. So when I write with a G2, I always go with print. It feels weird to me because I was taught cursive in 3rd grade, didn't write in cursive for a long time. It wasn't until I picked up fountain pens again when I was 25 that I wrote cursive again. And I had to like pull out the old sheet and look up, how do you do an uppercase Q? That's weird. Things like that. How do you do a Z again? Stuff like that. I literally had to go through all that again. I had to like dust off the cobwebs in my brain from, 15 years prior and think about how I did that. But it was so weird when I didn't write with fountain pens at all growing up. I didn't discover them until I was 25. And then I fell in love with them. Obviously, the rest is history. But literally the first day that I used fountain pens, I immediately desired to write in cursive because the pens flow so smoothly and you just want to just keep writing with them. So I immediately looked up how to write in cursive again, and it's been that way now. Whenever I write with a fountain pen, it's always in cursive. But whenever I pick up one of these things, I go back to print. I think it's because it's an ingrained habit for me. I'll intentionally like try to write in cursive with a roller ball, and you can do it pretty well with a roller ball because they flow fairly smoothly. Ballpoints I just can't even handle anymore. But with a fountain pen, like, it was instinctual for me. Fountain pen, cursive, boom. I know not everybody's that way, and that's totally cool. But for me, that's just how it is. So, to think about like the prospect of cursive dying, and like the usefulness of cursive dying, it's kind of like Morse code. It's like, who knows Morse code anymore? It's so specialized, like almost nobody knows it. Is cursive gonna go the same way? And that's, man, that just like, I literally saw your question. I was like, I don't want to answer this one, but I I have to bring it up because it's a really important thing that I think is kind of a pivotal point in our society right now where there's kind of an attack on cursive. So that's kind of rough. That's kind of rough, and I don't have a good answer. I hope I can spark some discussion. The thing I will say is that you know, it's there's something that I've found that I think is pretty neat. I haven't gone through the program myself, but it's called Cursive Logic, and I'm in no way affiliated with them right now. I'm just plugging them because they have a Kickstarter, and I heard that they're trying to do some campaign legislation type stuff to get their program in school. But basically, Cursive Logic it was on a Kickstarter campaign. It's a program that can teach you how to write cursive in about 4 sessions. So it way cuts down the amount of time it takes to teach cursive, which I think would be a really good solution to getting it back in the school system. If the amount of time that needs to be spent to teach it can be cut down, then kids can use it and maybe it won't die. Now, is that going to be an easy battle to fight? Absolutely not, because trying to do anything to get into the school system and stuff like that is a monumental battle. So it might be the kind of thing that it's just like, you know, parents teach their kids themselves, go through, if it takes 4 sessions, you teach this program, or maybe it's some like, you know, it can be like a night school type thing. I don't know, a little program that can be taught outside of the school system. I don't know. But I think it's something that you should be aware of. So look up Cursive Logic. I got a link to it in the blog. Check it out. It's kind of interesting. And you know, maybe there will be other things like that, or maybe there'll be more, you know, other innovative solutions that'll come about. You know, with change comes the need for adaptation. So I think maybe this is a way to kind of help address that. But either way, it's a tough spot, Trent, man. My heart goes out to you because I don't know that I have the perfect answer. All right, I am really taking my sweet time on this one, so I'm going to try to move it along. All right, I got some ink questions. This is from Ted Lee on YouTube. I have a few bottles of ink that I haven't used in 10 years or more, such as a bottle of Private Reserve 2003 DC Super Show Blue. Is it still safe to use? What would you do to test it? Thanks. It all depends. You know, ink can certainly last that long. It does start to kind of push the limits, though. I would say any ink that's, you know, some very few manufacturers will actually put like an expiration date or whatever on their ink. I think Mont Blanc does. I don't know of anyone else that actually does. I think Jeroboam puts a date of manufacture, but you know, I don't know that that's the same thing. So ink can definitely last years. A lot of it depends on how you store it. You got to make sure that it's tightly sealed and that it's not stored in direct sunlight. You know, you don't want to leave a bottle of ink sitting out in this glass on your desk for years because it's going to change the dyes and it's not going to be good. Likewise, you don't want to store it on a hot environment. You don't want to put it up in your attic or something like that. That's not going to be good. And it's going to depend too. If you've used the ink before, there's more risk of contamination and exposure to air and stuff like that, contaminants that could over time cause weird things to happen with the ink. So as opposed to an ink you buy and it's never open and sealed and just you gotta put it away. I don't know your situation in that respect, but I'll just kind of say it's a little different there. So if it was open for and if it was partially used, the chance of it being good, not being good anymore goes up a little bit, but it's not necessarily the case that it's like it's gone. So I think that's you know, testing it is kind of the way to go, which you kind of asked about. So I'll address that. So first thing I would do is, you know, just look at it, just look inside of it, and if you're turning it around and it looks like it's still liquid in a bottle, that's a good sign. You know, if you turn it upside down and there's like a clump of junk hanging on to the bottom of the bottle when it's upside down, that's maybe not such a good sign. But, you know, that's kind of the first test. Just look at it. Next, open it up, give it a smell. Now, ink has a bit of a smell to it sometimes anyway, especially some permanent inks and stuff like that. So your Private Reserve, you know, might have a little bit of a smell, but it shouldn't smell strong or weird or anything like that. If it has like a moldy, funky kind of smell, like dirty socks or like moldy, you know, bread or something like that, that's not good and you just shouldn't use it. I mean, it shouldn't smell moldy or funky or anything like that. It might have kind of a chemically smell, which is going to be kind of normal, but it shouldn't smell gross. Do you see anything weird going on in it? Like, are there any chunks of anything, or is there any like fuzzy crap growing on the top? That would be mold. So you don't want any of that. And then the next test, if it looks okay and smells okay, take like a toothpick or a popsicle stick or something like that and swirl it around in the ink, and then pick it up and kind of swirl it around, pick it up, and see if there's anything like weird going on. It should like obviously change the color of it, but it shouldn't have any stringy stuff or sludgy things or chunky bits of anything that are on the whatever device that you're using to swirl around. It should just be liquid dye. You know, sometimes you can have chemical sedimentation that can happen, so like little flakes of stuff can go to the bottom. That's not necessarily a deal breaker, but you shouldn't have like sludgy, stringy stuff like that. That's usually a sign of mold or yeast, and that's not good. So after you do the little swirl thing, if everything checks out and it all looks good, smells okay, looks okay, swirled around, everything looks okay, it's a candidate for being a usable ink. So that's cool. So then I would try it in some kind of disposable or inexpensive pen. Like especially if you have a glass dip pen, that's really good because nothing's going to hurt that glass dip pen, and you're going to be able to test it without really risk of hurting anything. You could also use a dip pen. If you have a dip pen, maybe that would help too. Or maybe just a cheap pen, a Platinum Preppy or something like that. You know, that's just a couple of dollars that if it ends up just not working right and clogs up and destroys the pen, you're not going to be at a big loss. So maybe try that. And then just use some discretion from then on out. If everything checks out there, just use some discretion about which pen you want to put it in. You know, if you have a $500 pen and you have a 10-year-old bottle of, you know, private reserve ink that ink is still made today, you could spend $10 and get another bottle of ink. If you're calling that ink into question at all and you're putting in an expensive or a rare or a pen that you really, really love, do you really want to take that risk on for saving a couple of bucks? You know, that's going to be completely up to you to make that call. But I think if you go through all the steps that I just mentioned here, you're probably going to be okay, but it's ultimately going to come down to being your call. All right, next question is from Bart Grossman on YouTube. I really appreciate the ink reviews, and knowing the dry time is quite helpful, but I wonder why nobody seems to use a blotter these days. I have a couple of very nice vintage rocker blotters, and I know you sell the Jeroboam desk blotters. Is there any reason not to use one? Do they affect ink sheen, shading, etc.? Yeah, sure, there's reasons not to use it. It costs money, it's an extra step, it's something you have to think about. So that's why people don't use it, for the most part. This particular blotter is actually one that a customer made for me a number of years ago. A fellow woodworker and sent me this thing, and it's, you know, made out of I believe it's Bubinga on the bottom and some kind of walnut on the top with a custom knob. It's really kind of cool. But it's the same shape as the Jeroboam rocker blotter, so it's the same concept. So basically the way it works is it has, you know, this wood plate on top that you unscrew, and it holds in this piece of paper, which, oh boy, I haven't taken off in a while. There we go. So you can just have the piece of paper. Oh, see, I should have. Okay, I'm not going to take paper off because it's going to take me forever, but that's the concept. You can take the paper off, replace it, flip it around, whatever. It has this, you know, absorbent paper that you can put on here, and then you just, as you're writing, when you get to the end of your page, you just take your blotter and you just go whoop, like that over your writing. And if you do it properly, it's not going to smear or anything. It's just going to pick up the excess ink off the page, and then you can flip the page over and go about writing. It comes in really handy when you're doing correspondence and you like sign it towards the end. It's not quite dry yet. You know, you just go over it a couple of times like that, and then you can fold it up and not have to worry about it smearing and imprinting onto the other side of the page and stuff. Or if you're writing in a journal or something like that, and you're getting to the end of the page and you're in a really good like thought process, you can take your blotter and just kind of like go over it, and then you can flip the page and keep on writing without losing all of your thought process as you would if you had to sit there for a minute and wait for the page to dry. So you do lose a little bit of sheen, a little bit of shading and stuff like that when you do the blotter, because you're picking up all that excess ink. So it's going to be a kind of a flat looking color on those parts that you're blotting. But it's usually just at like the very end, because whenever you're writing a full page, it's going to be like the last maybe line or two, really, that you're going to have to blot. So it's not going to drastically affect much, and it probably won't even be enough to like, whoa, what happened to the bottom of the page? It's just enough that it'll affect it a little bit, but you'll have to determine if the trade-off's worth it to you. So I think that's the main reason why people aren't using it. It's just an extra step, it's an extra thing. You know, people, especially if you're using it at work or something, do you really want this out on your desk? It's like you're already weird enough as like the pen guy at work. Do you really need to be the pen guy with the weird wood thing? You know, it's like people will probably, you know, ask you if you have a quill and wear like, you know, circular bifocals and, you know, like Ben Franklin, and ask if you're gonna you know, fly a kite in a storm and stuff like that. You know, they may make fun of me because it is kind of a distinctly like vintage, you know, product. So it's I think they're cool. I have one, I use it, you know, there's ink on it. I don't use it a ton, but I use it. So it's the kind of thing like you gotta determine. I think it's cool because I'm a geek with pens, right? I'm a pen geek, so I think it's cool. But other people may feel differently. I don't know. It's really up to you. But there it is. All right. Oh, and I also do have a video about the Jeroboam blotter as well, and kind of how it works. So check that out. I got a link on the blog. Next question. This is from Lalin on Twitter. Ink bottles, some aesthetically very pleasing, but some are more practical than others. Which ones are best? Okay, so this is going to be really kind of based on your personal taste. And I got a whole bunch that I laid out here. So, ones that I think are most aesthetically pleasing. Really, honestly, I think the end goal is to get both. I want something aesthetically pleasing and practical. That's the goal. Sometimes you have to sacrifice one for the other, and I have examples of all of them, okay? First one that I think is most aesthetically pleasing and most practical would be the Pilot Iroshizuku bottles. The ink is expensive, the glass is very heavy, it ships from Japan. It's a trade-off, you know, it is nice ink, but a lot of what you're paying for is this beautiful packaging, the heavy bottle, all that kind of stuff. However, you can reuse these things, so if you use it up, by all means. It's a heavy bottle, so it won't tip over. It's got a nice wide mouth, which is super important when it comes to functionality. It's also kind of tall, and it has a dip down in the bottom, so your nib can kind of sit down in that little cone at the bottom. So it's very usable even as the ink level gets fairly low. That's one tough thing with ink bottles, and I'll show you some other designs that kind of have that. Pelikan Edelstein is kind of the same way, not quite as tall and thin, so it's not usable quite as deep, but the bottle is gorgeous. Packaging is really nice too, so I just wanted to show that to you. Let's see here, what else have I got? Visconti also. Theirs is plastic. It looks really nice, but I mean, in terms of functionality, you can like drop it and it won't break or anything. So that's cool in terms of functionality. You may have different feelings about plastic bottles, and that's very understandable, but in terms of its design, I think it's very aesthetically attractive, but also it's very functional because as the ink level gets lower, it contours down. You can still fit your nib down in there, but it allows you to use most of the bottle before you have to go to a syringe or something like that. So that's very practical as well. Ones that start to not maybe get as practical, well, this one's kind of borderline. This is kind of in the vein of the Edelstein, but the Faber-Castell, it's a larger bottle, but it's very like wide and kind of flat. So you can only use about half the bottle before it starts to maybe cause some issues. Then you got to like start tilting your nib in there, or maybe kind of tilt up the thing like that. It is really nice though. It looks really, really nice. And then another one which I forgot to grab, which maybe I have one right here. So I will have to check right here. Here it is. Caran d'Ache. This one is also kind of cool, very aesthetically pleasing as well, but it tilts to the side like that. So it's kind of cool. You can get your nib down in there. Kind of practical, very aesthetically pleasing. You'll notice like kind of with all these inks, they're very expensive. Like they tend to be more expensive. They come from, you know, some pretty classy brands, which is cool, but you know, to have a really nice custom bottle, it costs money. Like that's actually one of the larger expenses with these ink makers is the bottle. And then the heavier and chunkier and more customized the bottle, the more expensive, but it's also expensive to ship. A lot of them come from, actually all of these come from overseas. So, you know, you got to ship those and it costs a lot of money in freight transit to get these heavy bottles over. So all that kind of builds into the price, and that's why these really nice looking, also fairly practical bottles are more expensive. And also kind of the key too is a lot of them have wide necks as well, which is also really good. Visconti one is probably the skinniest of all these, but all really good. Now let's swing the pendulum the other way, okay? Some that I think are very attractive, but not as functional. And this would be like my number one stunner here. Jeroboam, I love you. I think your 1670 inks are amazing and your bottle is gorgeous, but it is terribly impractical. I mean, I say that with love because I think it's amazing, but the neck is so small on this thing. There are definitely some larger pens. You can't get it in at all. And then when you do, because the neck is so skinny, it can only go straight down. You can't tilt it, you can't do anything. So it's like you're kind of limited once you get near the bottom of this bottle as far as what you can actually do to fill it. So your ink syringe pretty much has to be your best friend in that case. And then even the Jeribon, the 30 ml bottle, which is also very attractive, you know, and it's even got a little pen rest on there. Not that most modern fountain pens will fit on there. I mean, it won't really. It's made kind of more for a dip pen, which it's not a dip pen ink, so it's aesthetic, but it's not super functional. And then the mouth is wide, but it's so flat and wide that if you're using this bottle, you definitely can't even use more like even half the ink before you got to start doing weird things with the bottle to get it out there. So this is another one that I think is beautiful, but is not as practical. Now let's talk about ones that are very practical, but are not beautiful at all. And I would say that, well, both Noodlers and Private Reserve kind of take the cake with that one. Let me see if I can even get this out of here. It's always difficult to open the Noodlers boxes without ripping them. That's what I'm trying to do right now. There we go. And this is my beloved Noodlers Liberties Elysium, which, you know, I know some of you feel different ways about some of these inks, but this is the this is now the Noodlers bottle that's coming temporarily for the next few months, hopefully. Here's the original Noodlers Liberties Elysium, which is not bad. Like, this is a fairly attractive bottle, very functional. The reason Nathan uses these bottles is because it can hold so much ink and it's square, so the packaging itself, like the bottle, fills pretty much the whole box. There's no fluff. So when he's shipping them and whatnot, it's very economical to ship, and it keeps his prices down. That's why he does it. He's had trouble sourcing. Apparently the people that make the bottles are in the process of like selling the dyes or whatever that's used to make these things to another company, and it's taken a while to get it set back up. So in the transition, he's going to these plastic bottles, which I know everybody has feelings about these plastic bottles, not generally positive. However, he can get a little more ink in here, but it's a plastic bottle. And it's an opaque bottle, so it's actually going to be a little bit better for storage because it won't have UV stuff, but it's not the same. Like, it just doesn't look the same. You can determine if it's better for you or not. But very functional. It's tall, so you can fill for a long time. It holds a ton of ink. It's very economical. The mouth is nice and wide. And being that it's plastic, again, you can drop it. It's not going to break. But it's certainly no, you know, or, you know, just doesn't look as fancy. And then another one is Private Reserve. I love you, Private Reserve, but you know, your packaging is a little dated, and that's okay. You know, I understand. They've gone through some transition stuff. You know, the founder of Private Reserve passed away last year, and that's very unfortunate. This is the same kind of thing. It's designed for utility more than for aesthetics. It's just a circular bottle. They actually increased the size of their bottle, so you get more ink now. The mouth is incredibly wide. And it's just, you know, a simple label on there and stuff like that. So it's not as fancy. You know, you're much more likely to put this out on your desk to impress your boss than you will this. But I know most of you maybe don't care about that kind of thing. So it really just depends on what you're going for. There really is no right or wrong. Me personally, you know, I find that there's a trade-off. If you want a nicer, more functional bottle, there's usually a trade-off of price that you have to pay because it's harder to get bottles like this. Or if you get them custom designed, like, I guarantee you're never going to see another bottle like this, it's going to be expensive. It's just going to be expensive. You're going to have to pay. So it's always going to be a trade-off. Life is all about trade-offs. It's a nice little life lesson for you there related to ink. All right. I said I would move it along, and I haven't been doing that fast enough, so let me keep on going. All right, Chris W. on Facebook has this question. We all know you love blue inks. What are your top 10 blue inks? And I'm going to plow through these because I got to get going on my questions here. I do love blue. This list isn't going to be exactly in order, so it's going to be roughly accurate, but I didn't sit here and contemplate that much like, oh, is number 6 really better than number 7? No, don't take it that seriously. I just, like, from the top of mind, I went like, yep, this one, this one, this one, this one. And then, like, after like 6 or 7, I was like, let me go look at the swab shop. So I pulled up the blue page on the swab shop, and I said, okay, let me pick this one, that one. No, well, and this one, the color's okay, but I like the way this flows better, that kind of thing. So it's just super, super vague, broad generalization about which blues I like best. I will say I stuck to the blue page on the swab shop, which does include blue blacks, does not include turquoises or teals. So I didn't include really blues with any green to them at all. But I did include some that are darker and would be more considered a blue black. I took some liberty in answering your question. So here we go. I'm just going to plow through them. Noodler's Liberty Elysium, that is an easy one. I helped design it, worked with Nathan, it's exclusive to me, love it. It's got Patrick Henry on the bottle. I went to Patrick Henry High School, go figure. Bam, Diamond Majestic Blue. Love it, it's dark blue, it's got a red sheen, it's just one of my favorites. Dry time is terrible, it smears like crazy, but I love it. I just freaking love it. Okay, Pilot Iroshizuku Konpeki, I talk about it a lot. It's Goulet Blue. It flows really nicely, attractive bottle. I don't use it exclusively as much anymore, but it houses a lot of my Pilot pens. Noodler's Blue, I actually really love Noodler's Blue. That one is kind of what I was going for. I wanted a permanent Noodler's Blue when I talked to Nathan about Liberty's Elysium. That's what we modeled it after, because it is kind of a perfect Goulet Blue. Still love it, it's a great ink, very conventional ink. If you don't want the permanent qualities of Liberty's Elysium, Noodler's Blue is great. Noodler's 54th Massachusetts, great ink. It's a blue-black for sure, but I like the tone of it. I like that it's permanent. It's an all-around great ink. Rohrer and Klingner Salix. This is an iron gall ink. It's a modern iron gall, so it's not as like scary iron gall as what you might read on Wikipedia and stuff like that. But it's a permanent ink. It flows nicely. It's you got to keep it up a little bit more in your pen because it does have some iron gall in there. But I like it. It's very waterproof. Noodler's Bay State Blue. This is kind of a controversial blue, but it's just. And it's very purpley as well, so I tend just kind of not to use it as much just because of that. It can be a pain to clean. Bleach cuts it very easily. It cleans with bleach. It won't clean with much else. So that is how it works. So if you want to clean out Bay State Blue, 10% bleach in water does the trick. But it's just so vibrant and electric. There's nothing else like it. I also really like Diamine Blue Velvet. That's a recent kind of love. Very dark yet vibrant blue. It looks really nice. Really like that one. Diatramentis Indigo Blue. That is a darker blue, more like Diamine Majestic Blue. A little bit of red sheen to it, but very just intense dark blue. And then Diamine Regency Blue is right in that vein as well with Indigo Blue and Majestic Blue. I like all those. These darker, like more intense blues are going to maybe not flow quite as generously, or they might flow a little wet, but tend to kind of like dry out in the pen when they sit for a while because they're so saturated with dye. But I still love them. You'll use them regularly because they're just awesome. So that would be my top 10 list without an incredible amount of thought to it. But still, I did put some thought into it. All right, paper question. Alexander L on Facebook asked, start that over. How does the Maruman Nemesign paper compare to the Rhodia Premium? Okay, so I'm going to kind of talk through this. They're really kind of different papers. So let me just say that right off the bat. So Maruman Nemesign, it's all these wire bound, black cover, just not a great diversity in like color options and stuff like that. But you're asking specifically about, the paper. I think the Maruman Nemesign paper compares more to the conventional 80-gram Rhodia paper, the white stuff. Same paperweight, similar feel to the page, similar dry time and stuff like that. I think Rhodia is maybe a little more ink resistant than the Maruman, but you're asking about the premium, which is this stuff. And the premium paper is off-white, but it's really more yellow. Yeah, you can see that pretty well. It's really more of a yellow, so the paper color is very different. This is actually 90 gram. It's much slicker, so it's going to be more ink resistant. Dry time is going to be longer than it would be on the Nemesign. Also, it's just top staple bound tablet form. There's not a lot of diversity in your format options. This is blank and lined. That's it. You get a lot more options in terms of the Nemesign. I've got a whole separate video on these. It would take me forever to explain them all, but they're all wire bound and they have different options in terms of rulings and stuff like that. That is worth exploring. So they're both really, really good quality papers. I would say if you want like the best quality paper, the Rhodia Premium is going to be a little better. But in terms of utility, diversity of function, the Nemesign might beat it out a little bit there. But they're both, I recommend both of them highly. All right, I got a business question for you. This is from JK on Facebook. Not just kidding, but JAYK. Going to my first pen show this weekend at Dallas. What should I expect to see, and are there any rookie mistakes to avoid? I don't know if that's a business question. That could have been personal. Anyway, whatever. Are there any mistakes to avoid? Okay, so I would say that's exciting. Congratulations on your first show. The Dallas Pen Show is this coming weekend, I believe. Starts tomorrow, I guess. I've never been to Dallas. I've heard good things. I've heard it's a smaller show, but still good, intimate setting, affordable to get there, you know, affordable hotels and stuff like that. So I hope you have a lot of fun there, Jay. Let's see here. Check out their website. I got a link to it on the blog. They have a list of vendors and stuff that were there in 2014. I would imagine a lot of them would come back. Can give you some idea who's there. And I would see maybe check the Fountain Pen Network or anything like that. See if there's a meetup group or something. That's always a fun thing to do, especially if you're newer. You can talk to people that have been to the show. They can give you some pointers specifically about that show, about what's good to see. I can't give you that, but I will give you some general stuff about going to a show. You might want to check any classes they might have. Sometimes they have people that teach certain styles of handwriting or calligraphy or nib tuning or something like that. Might be worth you going and seeing if they have any classes that you're interested in. So check that out first, because that will help to dictate your schedule, because the classes are going to be offered at certain times. It might cost some money. So in terms of budgeting both your time and money, you want to kind of build that in first. And also some of the classes can fill up. And if you get there and you're like, oh, maybe I should take this, they'll be like, nope, it's full. You waited too long. So take that stuff into account first. If none of that interests you or they don't have a lot of options, fine. I would say go in with a plan. You know, have a budget in mind. Specifically think through if there's any specific products you want to buy, especially if it's vintage and it's stuff that you know is going to be hard to come by. So if you want to get, I mean, as a newbie, you're probably thinking, I'd like a flex pen or something like that, and you don't really know what you're going for. That's not what I'm talking about so much. It's more like, you know, I'm a Parker 51 collector, and I know that if I want this specific pen that was only in this finish at this time with this color cap and this color barrel, and there were only 20 of them in the world, you want to gun in and go for that first and see if it's there, see if you can find it. If you find it, buy it immediately, and then worry about the rest of the show. So if you have something specific in mind, hunt for that first. If you don't have anything specific in mind, I think that's actually probably easier. So then I would say go into the show, have some kind of budget in mind, maybe just bring cash, like a certain amount of cash, and that's it, because it is going to be easy to go in there and be like, oh my gosh, I need this pen, I need that pen, I need this pen, and you can very easily go over your budget. So if that's something that you're concerned about in any way, I would go in with cash in hand, so that you won't go over budget. That said, when you get to the show, it's going to be kind of overwhelming. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on, a lot of people there. And so I would say it's best to, if they have a layout of the show with who's there, that's great to study up. They may not have that. I know they don't have that in DC, but maybe they do in Dallas. I don't know. But either way, it's good to just take a lap. Just don't stop and talk to too many people. Try to get there first thing in the morning, right when they open up. It's going to be crazy. That's going to be the busiest that it's going to be probably, is right when they open up. But still, you can get in there, and if you don't spend a lot of time at any one place, you can kind of walk through and just get a lay of the land. You can see who's where. I would recommend bringing a small notebook and a pen with you, and just take note of the table that you, maybe just sketch out, like even just like the area of the room or something like that, and put a mark by the tables you'd like to come back to if there's not anything specific and rare that you need. So I would recommend just taking a lap somewhat quickly, just perusing and getting a sense for what's there. Because what sometimes can happen is you spend so much time at the first like 10 or 20 tables that you get like tired and burnt out, or you run out of time or whatever, and you never even get to the back end or whatever. So go in, come up with a plan, try and get through the whole thing in like an hour. And then, or I don't know how big the show is. I know DC is pretty big. There's like 200 tables or something like that. And so that you really got to try to roll through quickly. You may have a little more time in Dallas, but I would recommend kind of blowing through, scoping things out, make a note for yourself mentally or write it down as to what you'd like to come back to. And once you've gone all the way through, then you know, oh, you know what, that one table did have that one thing that I really kind of want. And you can jet right to there and spend a little more time. Also, when you're trying to talk to specific vendors or nib grinders or whatever, if you need any nibs ground, sorry, I should have mentioned this. If you need any nibs ground, go there first. because they're going to fill up. They're going to have a list, and you're going to be on their list. What a lot of them do is they have a list. You sign your name up, and they just go through their list. And if you're not standing there when they call your name, they drop you off the list. Or then maybe they'll keep you on for a little bit, and when you come back, they'll put you next on there. But they're just kind of rolling through. It's not like you're guaranteed anything. If you sign up your name and you disappear, they're just going to forget about you, and because it's just going to be so on. So that, if you need Nibs ground or any customization work like that, go there first to whoever you're going to, because that will fill up. That said, you know, you go through the show, and then you know, wear good walking shoes. I would recommend wear clothes you're going to be comfortable in. You know, this sounds kind of funny, but I know in DC anyway, a lot of people wear like vests and like shirts with pockets in them so they can have their pens kind of out and at the ready. People even wear like fishing vests and stuff because they have lots of pockets, or like a photography vest or something has lots of pockets in it, and people just carry like 20, 30 pens in all those pockets. It's kind of cool, you know. It's like kind of a joke, like, oh, all the fishing vests. But no, it's true. It's a very practical thing. So if you have one of those laying around, maybe wear it. And you know, that's like the really hardcore people that go to shows a lot and have a lot of different pens that they're doing a lot of things with. They have them in the vests, and that's kind of how they roll. Let's see here. What did I not cover? Let's see here. Yeah. So anyone that you're trying to specifically talk to, or if you want to like get to know some of the vendors and stuff like that, when you get there first thing in the morning, part of the reason I recommend taking a lap and then coming back is when everybody comes in first thing in the show, it's going to be really busy. There's going to be a lot of energy, and there's going to be a lot of people around. So any vendor is going to be trying to talk to a lot of people at once. So you're not going to get good conversation probably with anybody. So do your lap, kind of come back, and then as people are more free, you can spend time and have a little more conversation with them. That's part of the cool thing about going to shows. You get to talk face to face. And then, you know, have fun, take pictures, you know, make sure you have lunch plans or something like that. Look to see if there's lunch things in the area, or maybe consider packing a lunch and just keeping it in your car so you don't have to consider going out. I know that's more of an issue in DC. That's a show that I'm familiar with, because it's really busy in that area. So, you know, depending on what day you're there at the show, it can sometimes take you like an hour or more to get lunch. And if that's not something you want to do, spend that much time, you want to maximize your time at the show, it'd be better for you to like pack something, just grab a sandwich in the car, and then keep on going, and then maybe that would work for you. But in general, have fun. I hope you have a good time at the show. Should be cool. All right, I just got a couple troubleshooting questions to close us out for this week. This one's from Lauren M on Facebook. And Lauren, I wish I'd thought of this myself, but Lauren said, last week you showed how to disassemble a Lamy Z24 converter, the red one, which is true. Can you also disassemble the Z26 converter? Yes. And I'm kicking myself because I could have easily mentioned this in last week's video, but I just didn't think of it for some reason. So I'm going to cover it again, and now it's going to be a whole separate video. We can slice this one up too. But yes, so I'm not going to show you how to disassemble the Z24 converter because the concept is exactly the same. So if you already know how to do that, you can do the same thing with your Z26, but I'm still going to show you anyway. The nice thing about the Z26 though is it disassembles more easily. So the concept is going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be easier to do, thus easier for me to demonstrate. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It's going to get a little close on my stubble here. But anyway, here is the Lamy Z26, and it is a piston converter. So it has a piston that slides down when you twist it, and then it slides up when you twist it the other way. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is pull off the metal shroud. It's kind of hard to do. Well, actually, I can do it. Whoa, lost it. I can actually do it just with my fingers. It helps to have, you know, a piece of rubber or Goulet grip or a rubber band or something like that. I have these little Goulet grips here that I'll grab. So if you have a little piece of rubber or something, you can just slide this right out of there. And then I'm going to try and do this just with my fingers. Look at that. Okay, it just comes right out. So for whatever reason, it's easier to do than the Z24. What the heck, I'll go ahead and do the Z24 too. Now that I know how to do it, it's really easy. So this metal shroud comes off. It's a little harder to pull off, but if you look up at the top here, it'll actually be easier for me to show. You can tell that like the plastic part of the converter here is different. It's clearer on the Z24, the end is a little different, and it doesn't have these little posts on it. Not that that matters in this case, but there's one more difference that matters right now, and it's like there's a little slit that's cut in the top here, and it makes it easier to pull the mechanism out of the Z26 than it does out of the Z24. So I'm gonna pull the Z24 out. I gotta get a good grip on it though, pun intended. and it's going to take me a second to get it. There we go. Okay, so you got to really have some force on the Z24 to be able to do it. But if you look at the Z24 and Z26 body, you can see there's a little slit that's cut in the top of the Z26. Can you see that? You can see my chin pretty well, but you can't see that so much. Anyway, trust me, there's a little slit that's cut right in here. It is not that way on the Z24. So the Z24 is a lot more pressure, and this is a brand new Z26 that I have just, I think, disassembled once maybe, but yeah, I can actually do that just with my fingers. So the cool thing about this is if you get ink behind the piston, you can clean it out easily. You can grease up, grab a little bit of, your silicone grease here, and you can grease up, the piston rod. You can put a little grease on the seal, and it'll keep it moving smoothly. And then all you got to do is press it back in place. You put the metal shroud on, that'll help to keep it in place, and then you can keep it operating smoothly. Very, very simple, even simpler than the Z24. So, great question, Lauren. I'm kicking myself for not having addressed it myself last time, but at least now you know. All right, last question I have for this week. Push all my stuff out of the way. This is from Prachi L on Facebook. My TWSBI 580 extra fine writes exceptionally dry. Do you have any suggestions for improving the writing? Thanks. I do hear this from time to time with some of their nibs, particularly like the extra fines. The finer the nib, the drier it has the tendency to write, because it's not making as much contact. The capillary action is not quite as strong. So this is a 580 all. That's why you're seeing the aluminum thing here, but it's the same concept. So one thing that can help, assuming that the pen is functioning properly and stuff. Well, actually, before I get into how to actually do anything to it, I will say it's always good to clean it out. Even if it's pretty new, whenever I am using a pen that's relatively new, I always clean it if I have any flow issues whatsoever, because like 80% of the time, that'll fix it. So clean it out really thoroughly and see if that helps. If that doesn't do it, it doesn't change anything. And if you've used the pen a bunch too, and you haven't cleaned it in maybe a while, or the pen's been sitting for a while, maybe it's had ink in it for 2 or 3 weeks and it's kind of started to dry up a little bit inside the nib and feed, that can dry things up too. Cleaning it out will fix that. So give it a thorough cleaning. That's like step number 1. If it's still doing that, or if it's new, you cleaned it and you're not dealing with that mess, I would say, check your ink. Maybe sometimes some inks write drier than others. So is it an ink that you have issues with in other pens, other extra fines and stuff like that, if you have any handy? Or if you have a different ink, maybe just try a different wetter ink if you have one handy. If you don't, that's okay. Sometimes the nibs on these pens can be a little tight. So that means that rather than having a generous gap that allows capillary action to happen, if the nib is such that the tines, I don't know how to visualize the tines, but I'm just going to use my hands here. So say these are the tines, this is the tip of the nib. You want to have a little bit of a gap here when you're doing it. If it's too tight and they're pressed together like this, it can stop capillary action from happening unless you're pressing down on it, and then it writes wetter because you're spreading the tines a little bit. So if you intentionally, you got to be careful when you're doing this because you can overdo it, but it's a steel nib, so it takes a bit of intention. But as you're writing, if you just kind of do some short strokes, like maybe a 1/2 inch to 1 inch long, and write with a little bit of pressure, almost as if you're trying to flex the nib out a little bit. Write with some very intentional pressure as you're doing it. And it's going to write a broader, wetter line. Do that a few times intentionally, and then write with it normally and see if it's writing any wetter. Do it a few more times until you get it to kind of write how you like. You're essentially adjusting your nib to write wetter. Now, you can overdo it. You don't want to go too nuts, but that's kind of the trick that's generally used. If that isn't working, along with the cleaning and everything else, it might be time to reach out to TWSBI just to see. If you're trying different inks and all this stuff and you're just so frustrated, I would try reaching out to TWSBI. Their email is TWSBIinc, TWSBIinc @gmail.com. So I would recommend trying that and see if there's anything they can do to help troubleshoot it. Could be an issue with the feed or something like that, maybe, that they can help you with. But that should be able to help you out. All right, the question of the week for this week, I'm going to go back to the question I had earlier. This is relating to writing in cursive. So I'm curious, I'm going to spark a little bit of debate here, and I'm going to ask you, what do you see as the future of cursive writing, and can Or should anything be done to try to save it? That is the question of the week for this week. A nice, meaty one that I think will spark some interesting conversation. So what, if anything, should we do to try to save cursive writing? Or is it just inevitable that it's going to die? So that's it for this week. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to YouTube. We got quite a few subscribers now, over 28,000. That's pretty awesome, guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the support. If you liked any of these things and you want to check them out, everything I talked about here is available at gouletpens.com. So go check it out. Yeah, if you got any questions, be sure to, for next week, whatever, ask on YouTube, blog, Facebook, wherever. We're having a harder time responding to questions that we haven't answered because of the way that Facebook is handling things right now. I imagine they'll change it back. YouTube went through this too, 6 months ago or so. They changed it to where it wasn't nested comments. It lasted a couple weeks. They changed it back. So I imagine it's the same kind of thing with Facebook because it's not a better process. So they're going to have to change it back. So that's it. Yeah, I enjoyed this. Thanks for letting me into your life for such a long period. And I hope you have a great week. And, right on, of course.